Here we go.
All right.
Hello, I'm Marcel Sarmiento.
I'm Gotti Harrell.
And I'm Harris Charlams, the DP on the film.
I'm Philip Blackford, the editor on Deadgirl, as well as helping with the music and doing a lot of the sound or all of the post sound. And to my right is
Joseph Bauer, did the music composition.
I'm Trent Haga, and I wrote the screenplay for this movie we're about to watch. And I'm sitting here with
Noah Segan
Plays JT.
Shiloh
Fernandez plays Ricky.
And it is midnight. We're sitting in the house of our editor
In the Hollywood
Hills, where most of this movie was put together.
it was kind of a dream come true. I always imagined, hey, you live in a nice house, you kind of have each room is doing a little bit of the post. I know Coppola recently did his last film that way. They kind of rented a villa, and we kind of had that going on here. Joe was composing down here in the living room, and I was upstairs working on picture stuff, and we had another gentleman, Andrew Patterson, helping us do sound post as well in another room.
And sleeping 3 hours a night.
Yeah, very little sleep for those last couple months. I think we started editing in the summer of 2007, and we carried right on through the summer of 2008 when we started really finishing all the sound post and the mix and the music and delivered to Toronto. A huge coup for a little crew like this.
this was shot in North Hollywood at the Hollywood Rec Center.
Right, this was
And
not a high school, I recall.
So we shot a lot of the high school scenes here over, I think, 1 or 2 days.
Coming up here is a great moment where, we have this little bit between our hero and his love interest, and the music, I think, really helps sell why there's something more to this little moment. When you didn't have music here, it was sometimes hard to... And also, the movie's just started, so sometimes you don't know what's important and who's important to watch.
True,
And the music really sort of lets you know, hey, pay attention to this. This girl matters.
Yeah, I think it's sort of worth noting that all of the whole movie was shot in LA. I think even people that live in LA would have a hard time knowing
Yeah.
it was shot here.
Purposely shot, though, not to look like L.A.
Yeah.
No palm trees,
And no
things
palm
like that.
trees was the standing order every day.
Yep.
So we consciously made a decision not to use cell phones.
No iPods. We didn't want anything that was too modern, too contemporary. We didn't want this to come off as sort of a commentary on kids today and have it be universal things from every generation.
But not also call attention to that.
Right.
I don't think we've gotten called out on it too much, so I think it works. Animal Collective, great. Yeah,
Yeah, it's great track.
got some great music. Kim Randall, our music supervisor, and
That's Marcel's shadow right there.
Yeah, I think that shot sort of like really expresses the style of the movie. I mean, try to be really creative with it. I mean, I think you guys really made it clear from the beginning that you wanted to do something different.
The script felt very extreme, and so I think we just had to sit around and figure out, well, how are we going to actually tell the story?
yeah, I would say when we first met with you, Harris, I remember we'd have dinners, and it was really important for you to have time where you could do things that were really interesting. I think it's a beautiful movie. It's one thing everyone says, whether they like it or don't like it, that the movie looks great. A lot of times when you're doing a low-budget movie and you don't quite know what you're going to be facing on the day, and you can't obviously pre-plan a million things because a lot of it's running and gunning. Yeah, I think early on we said, okay, we'll be handheld, sort of have it feel real, documentary style.
You really sort of feel like you're there walking along with them. I know it's sort of shaky, but I think it gives it a sort of energy.
You can see the dirt in the background uneven and rocks and crap on the ground, like Harris had to walk backwards holding the camera and shoot all this, and I think he did a pretty good job. We had a lot of complaints about this opening sequence, people saying, hey, you should cut this down, and I always loved it. I always thought you needed to get to know these characters and just see them as friends and kids, and for the rest of the movie to really work.
We kind of kept trimming this quite a bit. And actually that moment there where Ricky kind of stops is a kind of completely manufactured moment. It was something that really wasn't scripted for him to kind of stop. We just kind of found in the footage that we could kind of indicate that distance between the two of them, which was, getting our main character points across in this scene.
And I think it was important for us, for the beginning of the movie, to have it seem like a normal movie.
Yeah, a little misdirection there at the beginning.
I was carrying that bike.
Yeah, I remember being super hot, not really liking pushing it through the sand very much. At the end, I was kind of like, fuck you, Marcel Sarmiento and Gotti Harrell. I'm carrying this bike. I don't care what you say. It was a good time.
Yeah.
So this we spent quite a bit of going back and forth. It seems like a really simple cue, but there's a big question about what tone to establish early on in the movie, and none of us wanted a traditional horror score in any way.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about starting a mood and a tone for the whole film that feels unique and appropriate to this film only, and not other horror films or other teenage films or other coming-of-age films.
green screen. I know it's a little easy to pick out, but
We shot them in a field. They were
Yeah.
nowhere near that building.
Is
I
it
remember
safe
that.
to say that all that graffiti is all CGI?
Yeah,
Can
this
we say
shot
that?
is the matte shot.
Here we have the kind of harp and the
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of pretty harp juxtaposed with the kind of bass, which feels a little foreboding, and kind of like the
Absolutely, yeah.
juxtaposition of the more pleasant sounds with these sounds that maybe don't normally go with a harp and a celeste.
here's a beautiful shot that Gotti in Photoshop enhanced.
Yes.
His first matte effect.
Now, this was at the beginning of the shoot, if I remember, right? This is
Yeah.
like one of the first couple days. So
It was.
we were all just getting to know one another and sussing out the scene. So I guess it was a good scene to do.
there was debate about whether to have some music here, but it just seemed to continue the mood
Yeah.
really well and keep the vibe up until our rock track
The
that's
sense
going
of
to come
discovery was always a big thing. For
Absolutely.
Marcel and Gotti.
So this was all shot in a real hospital downtown LA, and some of that equipment you see in there was actually just left in the hospital after it was abandoned. So it was a pretty great set.
Yeah, they let us do anything we wanted.
The idea came up is just how do we bring this music in here? You know, how do you start a source track? Because every time we would just start the track, it just didn't seem to work. It just seemed to be a little bit too abrupt. It seemed to make sense to just almost make it come from the building in the reverb and kind of slowly filter it in.
I always really like the energy in the scene. I mean, the way it is cut together and everything.
This is the best day I had on the movie.
That's true. You had fun. I remember getting hit with those tiles that were on the roof every single time I tried to throw something in the air.
And now he's
That's
only
how it
got
would
a
come to
little
my head.
bit of mesothelioma.
The one thing we got in trouble for in this building was coming up right about here. That we got yelled at. So I think they were upset because then they couldn't rent that room out to like someone who could like make it look nice. ER shot their pilot in this building, so you can imagine you could like dress this up.
See later, we used this hospital as classrooms for the school, and it just allowed us to do so much in one place. I think there's always like 3 or 4 shoots going on. Remember, the Zombie Strippers was shooting while we were there. I think there was an episode of Monk.
The sound of that can was a great sound, and I used it like 2 or 3 other places for other kind of production sound. I mean, given the low budget nature of this movie and the speed we had to put it together, and we used as much of the production sound as we could. But, you know, there's a fair amount of design work that went into the atmospheres down here, creating drones and kind of tonal textures that could give the space a real life.
They go to all the other buildings, that way they wouldn't have to take the real dangerous patients outside to get them to a different cell.
Now, this is another example of a scene that has a couple of shots that were shot during our couple of days at pickups a couple months after we shot. Just sort of interesting how the stuff's pretty seamless. And I think even one of the shots is in a different location.
Yeah, the one over his shoulder. I think it's the next shot coming up is
The reverses, yeah.
yeah, it's in the hallway where they first discover the door.
Yeah.
This stuff, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
stuff.
this stuff's from a different location months later.
I mean, I was really happy the way the stuff turned out down here, and just in general downstairs. I mean, the quality of the camera is sort of putting out just a little bit of grain and the soft blacks, really beautiful.
Now that boo was really tough to make sort of effective because it's, you know, a little cheesy and whatever, but I think Philip finally found something that I think when you hear that in a theater, at least you jump a bit.
Hopefully the kind of sounds we're using are a little bit more original than the standard slams, and tried to spend some time coming up with something a little bit different. This was always a really big challenge, this whole thing with the dog creeping in from a sound design perspective, because he's pretty much right there, right on top of them. So trying to make that believable in any way, we got some sounds for the toenails against the concrete that helped us.
What was this dog called again? What was the breed?
Let's see, Mexican hairless something.
Yeah.
And this was the dog's first movie.
This is one of the scariest dogs in cinema history.
Dude, this
I
dog
believe.
was scary, man. He was all greased up too.
These are the best leg
Right
double
there.
I've ever seen. I mean,
That's you, Gotti?
Yeah, it is me.
So, I mean,
The original script was a little bit different than this. There just was no dog. The kids were just wandering around and, went exploring and found the place.
The dialogue they're saying right now
Pissed off pigs and pissed off dogs.
is actually dialogue from a different scene. We shot a scene where these guys are having this conversation in a completely different room, and it didn't work, and we just laid it over this because you can't see them down the hall.
Now, this tunnel was pretty disgusting.
Yeah, we never went in. We sent them.
We sent Shiloh and Noah in, and they surprisingly didn't complain too much. I thought we'd have a fight on this one.
I remember the first cut of this was like 3 minutes of them just crawling.
Yeah, we had a lot more of getting them to the door because in one sense you want to put some obstacles in their way and you want to have them on a journey a little bit before they actually get to the door. But transitions consistently were a challenge, and so just getting them to the door was definitely something we kept playing around with.
I don't know if you noticed on the cement there, the lines of someone counting time. It's very subtle. This is always one of my favorite sequences.
And it looks like a dead...
I'll say that moment right there that just happened where Ricky says, I think that's a dead end, and when it cuts to the long hallway, his voice suddenly echoes down the hall.
Where do you think that goes?
Philip, our editor, actually did that quick little effect. Never forget that day. I was like, wow, like I can see it now as a movie.
So much of this movie is sound. No offense, Harris. It's
Yeah,
also
we're-
picture.
taken.
It's
No,
also
none
picture.
taken, yeah.
Listen. We got to look at something while we listen to Philip's work.
This was always a challenge because this is all shot in one take and there wasn't any cutaway coverage. We just had to kind of let it play out, try to keep it interesting with the sound.
Yeah, I mean, I think before we did the sound design, it always felt flat.
Yeah, felt
and then
long.
once we put the reverb on their voices to make some space between them, it really came together. It felt scarier and more secluded. And
Yeah, it definitely has much more mood. We spent quite a bit of time, as most people wouldn't probably appreciate, but working on different subtle variations in the drones and trying to come up with original drones that were from sources wouldn't have heard before, and having them modulate in subtle ways that do the same kind of scoring you'd get from a traditional instrumental score, but somehow blending it with the sound effects to all make this is certainly these beats of them discovering the room. I know we did multiple iterations of them creeping in and discovering her here.
The movie was shot with a Viper Thompson camera, and we recorded on the Codex system. It's a digital recorder, essentially a hard drive recorder. The disadvantage, unfortunately, to it was that the camera always had to be tethered. It always had to have a wire running to the recorder, which made certain scenes a little tricky. The reason we chose to use the Viper and the Codex was because we didn't want that typical horror, dark, contrasty blacks and just contrasty image in general. So we were able to get those softer blacks and slightly more washed out image, which I think separates this movie from a typical horror film.
I think this sort of murkiness, this milkiness is just really gorgeous, and it feels like what it feels like when there's an absence of light.
Also, the Viper is the only camera that allows you to do natively widescreen without losing resolution.
We knew that we could shoot in this way, and we all could go home at the end of the day with the material on DVDs that we
had laptops.
Laptops, that we could edit, and that's the stuff we used until the day that we went back to the full res high def material. The high res material was on about 40 terabytes of hard drives.
Which is all
in my
sitting
closet.
in boxes in Marcel's closet.
And mostly you, Harris, worked with some new software developers, Silverstack. But
Yeah,
I mean, one story I told, I think, in some of the festivals, which I think is really interesting, is, right before we went to Toronto, there were a couple of red lines, like a single pixel going across the entire screen of a few frames of red lines in our picture. And I could go home, open them up in Photoshop, paint them out.
And email them to us.
And then email them back, all in a matter of, 10, 15 minutes. It's just...
We didn't have to go
amazing.
to a lab.
Didn't have to go to a lab and pay $600 an hour online and all that kind of stuff. So
it was clear that it was not a completely flushed out system, but you guys weren't afraid. Like, we like the way the images it puts out. We think it'll make the movie better. Let's do it. And I think once we did that, and that really was sort of the approach to the whole movie. I mean, we weren't scared to try things, and I think that's what made it different and made it exciting.
When we first read the script from Trent, we were looking for a movie to make. We went to his house, and he gave us a pile of scripts. And then there was one script on the shelf that he's like, you don't want that one. You can't make that one. No one will make that one. And we're like, well, let's just...
Don't waste your time.
Yeah, he's like, and he gave it to us. We went home and we read it, and we were just sort of shocked. And we sort of were like, can we really do this? But there's something we couldn't get out of our mind about it. Just really interesting and sort of relatable in that weird adolescent fucked up way. And
seemed on paper to be a really traditional type of horror movie. but kind of infusing it with, you know, a lot of these universal teen themes.
Intimacy and abandonment.
Losing your friends. You're not in control of your emotions. And
when a girl breaks up with you when you're young, you feel like killing yourself, but not really. But you feel that, and the feelings are real. And you write down in your diary or tell your friends, I'm gonna, I want to die, and it's not really true. And that only happens when you're young. It's interesting because a lot of people, I think, complain about the tone of the movie, or not the tone, the cavalierness of everyone's reaction to the fact that there's a naked woman, and also what some of them do with her. But the truth is when you're young, I think a lot of people can relate to not really thinking of consequences and what everything means ultimately, or what's right or wrong. You just sort of react.
We spent a couple days recording interesting sources at a friend of mine, electronic music kind of pioneer composer named Robert Rich, who's a really great guy. Let us come up to his studio and just kind of bang around and use like his modular synthesizer and some really kind of pretty unusual sound sources that we kind of collected into a vocabulary. A lot of thought had been put into these sounds, and having that to work with makes it a lot easier to experiment and find interesting combinations. So I think we used a bunch of those sounds in this sequence.
Bringing the piano
in
was the first sort of human instrument within the boiler room, I think. You really kind of feel it and not hear it so much, which is kind of tricky to introduce a new instrument out of nowhere.
Scoring it like she's not so dangerous, but intriguing, mysterious, beautiful, all those things that he's seeing. But now the shift that maybe she is dangerous here with so the music's doing all these kind of subtle things, hopefully in this sequence, to kind of push the story forward.
I think when people don't respond to the movie, they respond to things like, well, why did they go to the cops right away? Or why isn't he saying this is wrong and stopping him? It's like, it's very black and white. And I think what's true about adolescence and growing up, and a lot of people's experiences, is it's not black and white. It's very gray, and you're trying to figure things out. And you're also operating from a much more confined world with your friends and so on. It's not a movie about these kids deciding whether they're going to keep the dead girl or not.
Right.
Really, the movie begins once that choice is made. And like we told the actors when we were shooting a lot, that this is a pot of gold.
Yeah.
And I think majority of kids would say, oh, well, fuck it, we're going to keep the money.
Plus, these are your best friends. These are the only people who you really know, and it takes a lot for you to turn on your friends when you're that age.
It's much more interesting to me, at least, for someone who knows it's wrong and is trying to get out of it or do the right thing, but he's...
Or you wait, you're like, oh, maybe this will end on its own in a few days. Like, you're scared to do something that's going to change your relationships. That's all you have.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yes, and then this cue that we had a lot of debate about. Joe and I both had a cue we really liked that maybe was a little less emotional, a little more textural. But Marcel and Gotti really felt strongly that they wanted it to be emotional, a strong theme, almost like a love theme or love breaking apart. So Joe had this other theme that, to me, as it was originally orchestrated, was just a little too much. It was a little over the top emotional. But when we kind of reorchestrated it and just brought it down to the piano, I think it suddenly really started working much better. And it also gives us the opportunity to bring that same theme back, which I think works really well in the last reel where JT's pleading with Ricky. And that was a nice find, that theme would work and kind of bookend the movie.
The breakup theme.
The breakup theme, exactly. That's the word I was looking for.
At the beginning, JT hits Ricky twice. We cut out one of the punches. That's why Ricky has a black eye and a split lip, even though now in the movie he only gets punched once. Nobody ever seems to care about that.
And here's Michael Bowen, man, my mentor.
Yes, of course. Night of the Comet. Fucking great movie. Great performance.
Kill Bill, Jackie Brown.
Indeed.
Less Than Zero. This man is an institution. Taught me everything I know good about acting. I learned from this guy.
And once again, Shiloh, this is another one of the scenes that got added between the first draft and by the time you guys got a hold of it. All the stuff with
TCB.
Yeah.
We were lucky as hell to have him come do this part for us. There was a fuck up with his scheduling, and he was a little bit pissed, and he showed up, and there was a moment when he maybe wasn't going to show up. And
he did refer to it as amateur hour.
Yes. But then when he showed up and we were ready to shoot, he hit his marks, and he was just great.
He's very, very consistent. All of his takes were really, really good. So he was very easy to edit for that reason.
We kind of wanted to turn to the kids sometimes and be like, guys, you see, this is how, like, there can be problems, but this is what you do when you're ready to work.
I know all the talking in the world's not gonna make you be a man. You gotta do it yourself.
Trying to construct transitions in the film, coming up with this just blurring Ricky, which we did in post, which I think at least makes this a little bit more shocking with the gun. But yeah, we didn't have a lot of coverage to bring JT in the scene. I kind of, when I was just conceptually thinking about the scene, I tried to get it to work so that JT would come in, Ricky would then pause shooting, and then he shot one more shot like almost at JT, and you could almost make it work with the footage we had, but they really hadn't shot it that way and just couldn't quite pull it off. So just had him kick the can, which is that same can sound from before, and walk into the shot with a little ADR.
This was not the original location. We lost our location at the last moment, and we had to find something fast.
Yeah, our original location was like a field. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
It was
All
a
tall
field.
grass.
It was a hill with really tall grass on it.
Yeah,
He was going to be standing on the hill, shooting.
I thought it was interesting bringing the tunnel music in the exterior world.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of felt a little wrong at first, but it makes obviously
it's that
sense.
same sound that we used first in the discovering her that you kind of bring back in, because he's talking about going back down to see her. It's like that music is now coming up and living in the world outside of the asylum, kind of. Didn't we talk about it almost like a siren song, almost like it's calling him back down there, which includes the piano here.
There's a cut scene. It's the scene where Clint gets arrested.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
and it doesn't. It so would never fit this movie.
Yeah.
Well, it's they go back to his place.
No, I know
to
why
Ricky's
we
house,
shot
yeah.
it, but just the way the movie now plays out, it would just kill it.
This scene is lit with just one light bulb that's just sort of above them, but we didn't have a bright enough bulb, so we had to turn up the gain a little bit on the camera, so it got a little noisy. And
this scene was incredibly difficult to edit because the confession that JT gives here is actually about an 8-minute long monologue where he goes into incredible detail about what he did to the dead girl. And it was took a long time to figure out how much information we wanted to give,
and also how we wanted to shape JT, because he's a little more sadistic in his confession, and we cut some of that stuff out.
It definitely let the cat out of the bag really early. Like it was, it started off with JT basically confessing of having sex with the girl. And so it just seemed to kill the whole progression of this scene and the next scene. And in cutting it, we decided to pull all that out and both make it shorter and just make it a little bit more like he's uncertain about what's gone on.
I think as a viewer too, it's more interesting if he just starts with "she woke up."
Absolutely.
Because now you're like, okay, well, what happened? Whereas before he kind of told you what happened and then went back.
Yeah,
so,
it was answering questions before we had a chance to even ask them, which is always a bad thing, really. You don't want to do that.
You would know about that.
Now we have these other elements of the dead girl, just in some of the drones, some of the sounds we use around her. Right here, that vocal sound that's subtly in there.
While she stopped moving. For Christ's sakes, man, you fucking killed her. You realize that, man? You fucking killed her. And you bring me down here and show me fucking corpse, man? Rick, you sick
That's
fuck,
it, man.
Rick.
All right, enough of your psycho shit. We're taking her out of here now, Jake.
Yeah, this is really what a wonderful shot of her. Yeah, it's pretty gruesome. And this is another part of the movie where people are like, "What the fuck is going on here? This is what the? Oh my god!
What the fuck are you doing?
And we always had this bend down that you put here. It's kind of like the bottom falling out.
Yeah.
Yes, and our cuts to black, and we've gone back and forth on this. There's a lot of cuts to black in this film, and that's mainly because when you're doing a low budget film and you only have 15, 16 days to shoot, you don't necessarily get all the material to really construct transitions, and it's one of the hardest things to do really in putting a film together, is to get transitions scene to scene that really feel natural and organic and move the story. And sometimes you just have to cut to black when nothing else is there, but that one seemed to work especially well.
He fainted.
Yeah, absolutely. Ricky faints, and honestly, there was not a lot of good footage of Ricky falling down, so having that cheat just really makes it work. And then, of course, coming up with the idea to just put JT's voice over the gap, trying to revive him.
Well, I remember this scene right here was much longer originally.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was a whole thing, and I'll tell you, I mean, actors bitch and moan all day long about their scenes getting cut, but I'll tell you that one of the best jobs I think I ever did, man, in a scene was the part of this scene that got cut out. Funny enough, probably, and I mean, either it really sucked, which is entirely possible,
right,
or there was just all this stuff going down in this room, and they just needed to get us out of this room.
This second boiler room scene saw a lot of going back and forth, both cutting and with the music, trying to get this scene to really work.
I think it was the hardest cue for me to do.
Yeah.
By far, because it was this discovery, but really without ever being musical in any way.
I really liked this piano, the piano idea that you came up with around the scare. I thought that worked especially well.
It has like a hypnotizing kind of feel
exactly.
to it.
It's hearkening back to her theme that's connecting her and him. That scare was originally actually going to happen when he was talking about choking her in the hallway in the speech, and it just seemed like it would work better the second time. Had more power, and especially with how the music worked there.
Well, and he was so close to her too.
So it's more more threatening. I think what I ended up using for that scare was a combination of actually a wood scrape sound, wood against some metal. Which when you kind of layer it up has this weird vocal screechy sound, but that's actually not human at all, which is kind of appropriate.
We're all the same. When you're young, you're constantly sort of seeking out environments where you feel in control. And, I think it makes a lot of sense that these kids, when they're down alone in these catacombs and these basements, they suddenly feel in control of their lives just a little bit. And it's, up in the real world, they probably wouldn't make a decision so quick to keep the dead girl, but down here it's like a there's a bit of a euphoric sort of feeling when their lives are so out of control out in the real world, and down here they feel a sense of power.
It's Marcel's hands.
Yes, my hands always touch the dead girl.
Yeah, I love
not
that.
Because Noah had any problem with it, really. It's just we ran out of time usually, and we just had to grab that stuff when we could. And
we had a debate about that last shot of her, right? And that shot's very interesting, of her arching her back. But then we started thinking, maybe that makes her look too alien.
Not human enough.
Not human enough, which was the direction we were trying to push it with the music. But Gotti and Marcel definitely liked the shot, so we ended up just keeping it.
Actually, we just cut out a scene, a short part of the scene where they step away, and Ricky says something about calling the cops, and JT reminds him that it's his bullets in her body, almost sort of buying Ricky's silence with that threat.
I have to say, guys, in all honesty, I think you guys both did a really good job, but I'm not here to blow you. But you guys are both way more good looking than I originally envisioned. And I think that sometimes when I watch this movie, I'm like, man, but these two guys are so good looking, like they could get laid and they wouldn't need to fuck this zombie chick, right?
And this whole scene, just deciding to score it with just this low throb, because I think every time we had more music here, it was just kind of felt like too much for the sequence.
Well, it's almost like they're coming up with a plan now. So
exactly.
Musically, there's really not a lot you want to do. You want to just keep the tension. I kind of let the audience know that something is brewing, I think. Especially because we've got that kind of comedy beat here. So you just kind of have to ignore that musically.
Yeah, this actual wide shot here is an interesting case where the wide shot was really wide, too wide for my taste, and so with the Viper 2K camera, I was able to, in some scenes, actually push in a fair amount, which is one advantage of shooting high-resolution digital. And the image still holds up surprisingly well. We were worried it wouldn't, but when we saw it on a really big screen in Toronto, it never bothered me that we were probably pushing in 30%. So yeah, scoring this, the touching her, and also sound design was always an issue here, because just how much sound she would make. And I know in designing it, we tried putting more in for her.
Yeah.
But that just pushed the scene in a direction that didn't seem to help us. It was more distracting than anything. So just kept it very, very subtle.
It's almost like if she makes no noise, we don't know how she's reacting to it, which is way more interesting than if there's a cry or a moan or something.
Exactly, yeah.
By the way, these are my hands again going up Jenny, the dead girl. I think Noah was happy not to have to do that because it's not the most comfortable thing.
Last shot in the scene is Ricky's face as he looks at JT, and originally we had him almost smiling, which seemed to suggest a lot more, so we kind of scaled that back a little.
Actually, my brother-in-law drew the picture that you're supposed to be drawing.
I sort
of.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. You're right. I did not draw that.
Yeah.
I tinkered with it at the end.
So this was a cue that we never changed. One of the few. I always loved this cue, and I was really happy when Gotti and Marcel signed off on it. It's both intriguing and beautiful. It's romantic, which leads very well into him looking here at Joanne, because this is really our first scene to kind of remind the audience that Joanne is in this movie.
Also, sonically, just wanted something that sounded very separate from the tunnel stuff.
Absolutely.
But having the piano to maybe tie into the character, of course, very pure tones, very musical, very rhythmic, all the things that the tunnels weren't.
Right, basically. Right.
It's too bad we cut out the bassoon solo for Wheeler that we had here. Wheeler's theme, the John Williams School of Film Score.
And that was a hamburger that I wasn't eating because I don't.
Because you're a vegetarian.
I think this scene is great simply because A, we get to meet the character Wheeler, but B, we're out of that room.
Eric
And it's like,
Podner.
oh yeah, there's
Eric
a real world
Podner,
here.
man.
Eric Podner.
In his jammies. I tell you, it was always hard to keep a straight face around Podner, huh?
Yeah, he's a great guy.
He
He's
went
really
for
funny.
it, man. He fucking laid out.
Yeah, he did, and you know
He was
what?
always on,
really,
100%,
he pops
man.
in every scene in this
100%,
movie. So
that
he's
guy.
a supporting guy, but he's really good.
Yeah, he did a great job.
This is a scene we debated whether to cut or not. Not because we didn't like it, but just because it, when people felt the movie was a little slow.
It's basically just a mood scene. I really like how the music kind of creates that, and the shot of his eyes through the bookshelf.
I think a shot of his eyes just to the books really works well in
Yes.
sort of conveying
There's
the
an entire
mood.
edit of this scene that Philip made.
We'll never see the light of day.
That is purely using that angle.
But,
I just like he
he's
says
got-
you're entitled to whatever beliefs you like. He's kind of creepy.
Oh yeah.
You
there's
kind of don't
something
know what he's
really-
selling, man.
Yeah,
man.
he's like the weird adult figure. I mean, obviously, adults are like these weird things from another world that come into these kids, realm.
Marcel had this idea that we could crossfade here into the kind of the underworld, which is an interesting idea, and hopefully with the music and sound, it kind of, the whole thing comes together. The problem with actually losing the scene, if we were to lose it, was you have a Wheeler scene at the beginning and at the end, and we kind of needed both Wheeler beats. And we really had nothing else to put between them, and you couldn't go from one Wheeler beat to the other. So that probably guaranteed that scene stayed in some form.
There's the 170 freeway in the background, northbound.
There's this really odd thing. If you look at his hat, see this weird double? It looks like there's an error there or something. Could never figure out why that looked that way.
Now you ruined the movie.
I know.
Can
It
never
was a
watch it.
weird artifact of, I don't know if that was because of something with the digital camera.
Or because you have two heads, actually. That's probably why that is.
And here is the one of the three exteriors of Ricky's house. If you notice throughout the movie, it kind of
I don't
changes.
think we ever cut to the same establishing shot.
There was never the same establishing shot. It's never the same house.
This scene in the screenplay, it's like really a short little piece, and it's just that the line is like, he tries to masturbate to some porn or whatever, and he just can't seem to get into it because he keeps thinking about the girl or whatever. And it turned into this whole sort of thing. And I like all this stuff. It is reminiscent of that rebel teen type thing, and I really like that.
Yeah, that was a big. I remember looking at Over the Edge. I remember looking at Gummo. Of course, River's Edge.
I never liked seeing someone masturbating on screen, and but I still like the idea of it.
On the page, it basically says nothing. So the way the guys shot this gave us the material to kind of do something interesting here.
Well, I liked it for the fact that we could work on the music and then concurrently change the edit to match some music, and then vice versa, then change the music back to...
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's kind of a fun collaboration.
Which is something I recommend to anyone working on a film. You leave your edit open so that as you collaborate with your composer, you can keep sculpting the scene.
The Joanne Skinner role and this whole aspect of the story was totally based on this chick that I completely had the hots for the entire time I was in high school and I never got with. And I'm sure everybody's got one of those.
All the stuff of the sky here and the leaves and this shot of Joanne, all the stuff is all pickup stuff that we did.
We had a great cast too. You know, when we had an extra half a day with the equipment, we called and said, hey, will you just run out with us? When you have a 21, 22 day shoot, you don't have time to do things like this. You really don't. I mean, you're struggling just to make your pages and get your day. So if you can steal away and grab things like that, I think it just makes such a huge difference.
I did a lot of manipulation in the scene. I mean, I just had a bunch of pieces. That shot is reversed of Joanne going down, which coming back up just seems more creepy with her eyes kind of unnaturally. Hair moves. Just experimenting with the edit, kind of blending the two, and then scoring it with a lot of this was prepared piano, I remember. And we brought in a good friend of mine, Jennifer Thorpe, to record some both innocent and also kind of textural vocal sounds that we can then kind of blend together in the score.
It was always hard for me to reconcile the difference between saying dead girl and dead girl. That always bugged me. I always thought it should be she's dead girl, not dead girl.
The dead girl.
Not like a superhero.
Right.
Worked a lot on this cue, getting this right, because now we're really kind of kicking things into gear with the way the movie's going to go. And finding this odd combination of, I don't know what to call it, but dark comedy, kind of things spinning out of control, especially.
The gears are moving.
The gears
going
are
the wrong
kind
way.
of cranky. Yeah, exactly.
By the way, the dust right there, the dust coming up from the ground in the wheel, that is CGI.
This grind to a halt here with the pitch bend down really seemed to help this whole sequence as Ricky discovers Wheeler.
Fucking Wheeler?
Now here's the point in the movie where, at least when we went to festivals, where if this movie was not for you, you would get up and leave.
Yeah, if you read about walkouts.
It's a real shame because it's sort of like, this is like a turning point in the movie, and this is really not what the movie is about. And you kind of have to stick around to the end to kind of see that it's a pretty explicit scene, but...
It's also, you see a guy doing that to her at this point in the movie, and I think a viewer might think, well, shit, if it's happening at this point, it's probably going to happen 10 more times in the movie. It really doesn't.
Well, there really is no explicit sex in the movie.
But I'm sure a viewer, if they see that at this point, think, wow, they're probably getting me ready for even worse.
When we finished the movie, we were wondering if people were going to say the movie was misogynistic or not.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you didn't get it, it'd be an easy thing to throw out at us, but it's not.
I mean, I wrote the thing, and I love women and I respect them, and I feel that this was more of a indictment of like this stupid fucking pumped up sex idiocy of kids than anything. And I mean, ultimately, Ricky objectifies Joanne in the same way that JT does to the dead girl, and it all ties in together. And but some people just think it's we're getting off on the rape aspect of it.
We did a lot of screenings as we were kind of preparing for Toronto, and you could be upstairs just listening to the room, and you'd know if they were into the film when it got to this scene, because if you got a few chuckles and reactions, you knew they were probably going with the film. If you heard nothing, you would get a little concerned. Yeah. And definitely there were screenings where we heard nothing. The screening at Toronto, our big premiere, which was for 1,200 people, we were getting pretty big reactions in this scene.
This is also the turning point a little bit in the lighting down here. It's a little more contrasty, more cooler colors, whereas before it was just sort of monochromatic.
Right. Well, JT's brought in his little lamp. He's sort of slowly making it his place.
He's moving in.
He is adjusting comfortably.
The tone starts shifting a little bit as their world gets a little more fucked up through their eyes. The movie starts getting a little more screwy. And hopefully by building the movie from the beginning in a way where it seems like a normal coming-of-age movie about two kids, that you sort of have bought into it at this point, so you're going to take the ride.
I reconciled the whole experience by never looking at the dead girl as a girl.
Exactly.
I look at it like a Camaro.
I've said,
you know what I mean?
I've said to other people, it's like, what if I had written this movie and it was just a blob of space protoplasm with a bunch of fuckholes in it?
Exactly.
And these guys found this thing and fucked it. Would you still feel the same way? It's really interesting that in Saw movie you can take a real living breathing woman You can stick her in a chair. You can put her hair in a ringer and scalp her while she's screaming for her life and pleading, and then kill her. And it's like all good fun.
You can do that?
But yeah, exactly. You have a zombie girl that these guys fuck, and it's not like you're taking blowtorch to her nipples or pliers to her vagina. You know what I mean? It's
you're
like
just
you're
shooting her and then poking her holes and possibly having sex then.
Yeah, you're just having sex with the
exactly, but you're not like the point is you're not really getting off on torture. You're using it as a sex object.
We bring this cue back.
A little bigger this time, almost feels a little faster or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
well, we added this melody, right?
Yeah.
I remember working on that.
Yeah.
Getting that melody to come in there.
This junkyard
This was-
tripled the price that they quoted us.
Yeah, your typical thing where you show up and they say, "Oh, actually, we said it was going to be 500. It's actually going to be 1,500."
This whole junkyard scene was something that Gotti and Marcel for a while felt like they wanted to lose, and kind of argued to keep it in, mainly just because it gives us Ricky going on more of a quest, and also just to get us out of those tunnels, because we're going to spend a lot of the time in those tunnels coming up. So I cut it shorter. But then when we scored it, scoring from that action cue into this cue, you had concern that that's too short a time to make the adjustment.
I almost wondered what changed in Ricky's attitude.
Yeah, that justifies
riding his bike, to now leaving. And I guess it's the quest from leaving the craziness to now doing something about it, I think is what maybe makes it work, hopefully.
Here's that same bridge that we shot.
Gun shooting
underneath. That was another stolen shot, that we grabbed Shiloh and said, let's just go do something. It's often the stolen the day or day and a half that you get to just go and shoot random shit that really opens the movie up. So we always get asked how we cast Jenny Spain, how we found the dead girl, who would play this part. Naturally, it was tough. We had an open call and session in LA, and we got kind of the type of actress you would imagine who would show up for this kind of part. We definitely didn't want any sort of porny type of actress, and we sort of someone we knew someone who lived in Detroit.
Detroit, yeah.
Yeah. And she said, she might be into this. And she called us and said, I get it. She was excited, and we had her put herself on tape, and basically we asked her to sort of act like an animal and do an impression of an animal, and she had great instincts, and she obviously has a great look. She's beautiful and also sort of
very
unique looking, and she's really great and really good. I mean, we always talk about how easy she was to work with. Didn't complain. She had the toughest. Would lay on that cold table for hours and naked. And we actually made that bed, or had that bed made. That thing was
it
steel.
Weighed a ton.
Yeah, it was so heavy.
I'm not sure why they couldn't make it in wood and paint it, but
they didn't.
They wanted it to be authentic.
Yeah.
I think this is a scene that when we
did the
optioned the
rewrites?
script, we started working with Trent on adding. We wanted a moment where Ricky actually goes and tries to
connect with her. This scene was the reason that Philip wanted to work on the movie.
I didn't know that.
He said he really needed this kind of scene to get involved.
Philip is the editor and sound designer.
He's a very sensitive human being.
I don't know. It's just there's sort of an innocence to Ricky. I think we all go through that, and wanting something we can't have, just as he is with Joanne. That's what appealed to me, even though there's so much other stuff going on.
This scene, when you scored it, and as I had temped it, was much more emotional, especially as she reaches out here to touch him.
Yeah, that was always the moment. It stopped being tense and started maybe opening up a bit.
We liked it a lot, and I think everyone liked it, but I think at the end of the day, Gotti and Marcel both felt like they were concerned about the movie being scary enough. So this was one of the moments that they felt like they wanted to keep it tense rather than go for more of the emotion.
It's crazy how different that shot right there of her looking kind of sideways at him, how different that feels with this music as opposed to the piano.
Yeah, the other one plays much more sympathetic. Yeah, you feel sorry for her. But the idea of this whole scene is that she's reaching out to Ricky, and that even as she's going to grab him here, it's not out of attacking him, it's out of wanting help, like a trapped animal that ends up biting your hand as you try to save it. So it's almost more of a misunderstanding, an inability to communicate.
When I wrote this script originally, the dead girl was a little bit more badass, a little bit more dangerous. They had to chain her down a lot more. She struggled more, and the directors kind of chose her, to do this sort of limp thing. And it's interesting. She does, although she does get to fight back a little bit here, and you do get a sense of her formidable power.
Shiloh, how was it working with two directors?
The two directors, yeah, they kind of went back and forth. They both had a good grasp on what they wanted to do, I think, or how they wanted to look.
Well, one of the good things is that because we had, we shot on the Viper cam, and there was this whole home base where, you know, there were hard drives and things record, you know. So one of them always had to be sort of by the camera at the technical side, and the other one had to be on set. And so, you know, it was sort of like whichever one was there had the answer for you.
You know, the more I think about it, I mean, it was really easy for us because we, you know, we found the project together. We pretty much made the movie before we ever showed up on the set. And by the time we showed up on the set, we were connected by a one-way radio. We had our own channel.
Walkies.
We had our own sort of, we were connected. We could talk to each other. We'd constantly talk to each other. So if an actor turned to Gotti, for example, and because he was closest, and asked a question, and Gotti answered, I could also talk to Gotti through his earpiece, or he could talk to me, and sort of easily, almost like wrestlers tagging each other.
Get all the sound design done, I was able to call a friend of mine, David Farmer, who's a very talented sound designer, has done sound design on Lord of the Rings and King Kong, and he has just all these original animal recordings. And we always saw the Deadgirl as a wild animal, so he gave me a great selection that we could then subtly blend, and we definitely didn't want to go too creature on her. It was good to keep her fairly human. Jenny, the actress that played Deadgirl, had some great screams from production, which I also used quite a bit of.
She's really shaking her bum in that scene.
So there you go. Now the dead girl's like doing some struggling, right? It's like a different story now, ain't it?
When we were shooting this film, I was in the process of moving. I was able to box up all my possessions, take everything off the walls and the sheets off the bed, and just live in a sort of empty space, you know, because I was terrified of. It's a hard thing to turn on and off. Chauvinism.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the guy's
masochistic.
He's a psychopath, basically.
Yeah.
There's something about that character. A guy who knows that everything's kind of shitty and has a nihilistic attitude about it and whatever, that's somewhat appealing. You know what I mean? There's something empathetic about him, and that's why this movie is weird for some people, I think.
Noah was shooting Cabin Fever 2, and he was sent, I guess, the script, and he started emailing us and calling us from the set saying that he had to play JT and he would do anything, you know, it took. And
he never actually read for it. One of the key scenes from the movie is coming up, this one right here.
Oh,
and look at that. I mean, that's like, what's that?
It's poetic.
It's
poetry.
David Lynch or something, man. Something's going on.
And then a flower grows.
Yeah.
No one in any screening has ever asked us about that shot.
Yeah.
And we kept assuming we'd have to cut it at some point.
Yeah.
But just never.
So what does it mean?
What does that plan
What does it mean, Harris?
You know,
I always figured because people didn't understand what it was,
it would seem
they
smarter.
didn't want to question it. Yeah.
I always liked this actor. I don't know why.
Yeah, you know what? We had this great shot that the guys picked up of him walking into the asylum, walking into the shot and kind of looking around. And the idea was to put that at the end of the movie after all chaos had,
That's
like
hilarious.
because he had heard, you
I
know,
don't think I ever heard that
he
before.
had heard that Wheeler,
Yeah.
so he had like found his way there and he was looking for anyone. We didn't end up using that. And I hope everyone remembers that he's the guy that's the two jocks here. Dwyer and Johnny are tormenting him in the first scene in the background. I don't know if anyone picks that up. It's the same guy.
Wow.
He's even got a name. It's
I've got to change my score now. I didn't know that.
It's the guy that Joanne walks back over to and gives him his inhaler
I
back.
had no idea.
And then once again, in the original screenplay, all these kind of like interchanges between the jocks and the guys and whatever took place in the cafeteria. But we
Nolan
didn't
Funk.
have enough people to.
Nolan Funk plays Dwyer, and
Andrew De Palma plays Johnny.
Is this also the first mention of JT's grandma?
Yes. But there was always that dude, right? That fucking scummy dude. All the guys who could run free live with their grandparents.
It's
or
true.
whatever. JT is the total raised by grandma boy.
that guy walking in the background, by the way, just some guy walking in the
Just
background.
a homeless man who lives in the park.
Hopefully he won't. One thing we made a mistake of, you'll notice the mic pack in the back of Wheeler here when he walks away.
So this scene, we had some debate about the continuity, and the eye line makes no sense here. But I was overruled that it mattered, and it probably doesn't matter at all.
Here, the jock Johnny gives me the best look in cinematic history.
There's the look. Boy, you're going to get it. I don't know how you're going to get it, but you're going to get
yeah,
it.
yeah. In the back or the front, you're going to get it.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked about perhaps Johnny's attraction to Ricky.
This is a really great line.
Look at me.
Look at me, look at me.
Look at me.
Like that desperation.
JT trying to establish connection with the dead girl was an ad later in post, and I think that helped us with the kind of story progression with his arc. He's actually trying to somehow connect with her and have a, quote, real relationship on some level, but of course, you know, he's putting on airs as soon as Wheeler walks in the room of being the tough guy again.
Typical of teenagers just putting on for their friends.
We had a lot of arguments about how if they're in a abandoned building, where is the light coming from, and how is there lights and practicals, and no one's ever questioned us about it, like how they get power in there. It's funny when you're making a movie, you really start to overanalyze things, really wondering what people are going to get or not get, and I think if people are into the scene or into the movie, they let a lot of things go, but when you think about it, it doesn't make any sense that there'd be electricity in an abandoned building.
It would be kind of uninteresting if the movie was all had the same look. You know, there's no visual progression down there with, you know, a no light look the whole movie.
They have these herbal cigarettes, you know, that honestly, I can't imagine that they're any better for you than real cigarettes, because they're disgusting.
What's in them?
Like sunflower seeds, man. I don't know, like potpourri, like.
Noah Segan, who plays JT, I think told us he would have to smoke if he was going to do this movie.
And we were nervous about the continuity for smoking, and he said he was one of the greatest continuity smokers in town, and not to worry.
Spent the night. Why?
I think the guys on set maybe sometimes were concerned whether or not their makeup effects were really working, but just seeing them in the edit room, I was always like, wow, those are working pretty well. I think we don't have to do a lot of additional. We did do some subtle visual effects work there to just kind of clean it up and make it, but pretty subtle stuff. I think the makeup guys did a great job.
Those are my hands.
Those are hands, and what's amazing is all the close-ups here is actually a fake torso, but our effects artist, I mean, look at that. Look at the texture of that skin there.
What?
This definitely gets a reaction from the audience because it's pretty sick.
This scene was really all about just pushing the grotesque thought button as far as I could. The very first draft, it went a lot further.
This will give you an idea of how we had to think really hard about making this movie, but in the original script, the boys actually fucked the holes.
This scene was great because I remember in PE, if you didn't wear the uniform, you'd have to sit on the bench.
Right.
So even though I had a T-shirt, I had pants on that I tried to roll up and pass for shorts. So I still had to sit on the bench.
I think we added this scene. This is a scene we added. I also think in the original script, he didn't really ever speak to Joanne.
That's actually a two-line exchange that we, I believe, have lifted from a movie from 1979 called Over the Edge. And a lot of the feel of this movie we kind of got from that movie. It's about these two best friends in this suburban town and what they do because they're bored. And at one point, there's a girl says, "What are you looking at?" And the kid says, "You." And he's so cool for being so open about it.
I thought Harris did a great job shooting her here. And just the score, what do you do score-wise here? And we had a temp that was kind of going in this direction, but I really think you improved on it.
Well, I mean, it harkens back to the lunch yard.
The Celeste kind of sound, or the There's something childlike about it, which connects to the fact that what they're talking about and their connection is obviously in the past as children, or young teens.
And countering that with what's going on.
I love the subtle shift there on as he's venturing out, and just you bring it down to the EBO sound. It's just hovering in the air. It's like hovering, waiting for and then it kind of drops as she gives her answer. We actually shortened this cut right at the last second. I think it was Gotti's idea, and it was a good idea that she chided him a little bit more, was a little bit more cruel here, and I think it's better to kind of mitigate that. Makes her a little bit more sympathetic.
This actually was based on a message that was actually on my locker in high school.
I had a "you're a faggot" one. It wasn't spelled incorrectly though. Mine was spelled correctly.
Oh, yours is because you grew up in California, dude.
Those lockers. This is in the abandoned asylum.
Yes, we have to bring in about 8 lockers.
This is actually one of the best beating scenes I've ever seen in a movie.
There's a stunt double right there falling on the ground.
Yeah, we actually had stunt
We had a
actors
couple
for
stunt people in this movie.
For each actor, each person a different one.
It's good reaction there, Shiloh.
Thank you. I've been beat up a couple of times.
It looks good.
April Littlejohn is our stunt coordinator. Won an Emmy for Alias. We had a bunch of people work on this movie that was very strange. Like, we had the dialogue editor from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Here's the thing about this movie is, and we had people quit this movie, you know, right before we shot because of the content, and you know, just couldn't take it or got worried. I think went home and talked to people or had their spouses read the script and were like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But the people that made this movie, both the crew and the actors, I think one of the reasons why it worked is because they were really passionate about it and really got it, and were willing to take a risk on something that was a little bit different, and that's what made the movie really fun to make. Everyone who was there was not there for the money. And was not there for any real reason other than because they wanted to do something sort of interesting.
By the way, the bus there was just driving away, leaving the set. That wasn't actually part of the scene.
That's true.
Come on, don't lie. That was planned.
No,
it really wasn't.
We paid for the bus to be there.
And then the bus was leaving.
And then they were like, we didn't get to it. And the bus was like, I'm taking off. I've been here for 7 hours. And we were like, we turned the camera around and said, let's shoot this as it leaves.
And here we are. We're at the North Hollywood Rec Center. It's like on the morning on Saturday. There's like kids playing ball
Fucking
off to the
Eric
side.
Podner,
And
man,
Eric's
100%.
screaming about how we got this
100%.
We've got this fuck slave, and yeah, it was a good time.
Really gives it away.
She's our fucking sex slut.
All that stuff we had to add because we used to cut to this, and so many people in the screenings had no idea where the kids were.
Yeah, they said, where are they?
We would say they're in the trunk, and they were like, what do you mean they're in the trunk? So we actually had to show the trunk.
So we took a
slamming
red
shut.
camera.
Oh yeah, so this is we added a third camera to the mix here.
That's the great advantage now of having these high-def cameras that you can go out and when you're in the editing room realizing, oh, we can't really sell this transition or it's just feeling a little weak. Can we go out and grab some additional material? And
Oh my God, this scene was such a pain in the ass to shoot, dude.
Where did you shoot this?
In the trunk of a car. We shot it at Linda Vista in the parking lot. And we built
under
a
a
tent.
tarp.
Yeah, we built a tent to block out all the light. Eric Podner was like going fucking nuts in there because he's very like methody, and man, I don't know if he's got claustrophobia or what, but he was like really having a bad time. But it was hot.
I don't remember having a great time either.
that was our last iteration of the action cube, but I think my favorite.
It's most appropriate.
Yeah, we put more of the prepared piano stuff, like make it a little quirkier or weirder, and you layered in a few more of those, and I mixed them up a little bit, and I just really liked how that came out.
Of course, there's two directors, so whenever one of them would get tired, they would sort of change out, and I would have to keep going, which was always fun for me. Constantly changes to keep me.
I think
on my
eventually
feet.
the reason why I got a chance to, I didn't have the guts to ask you earlier, but finally got a chance to operate the camera towards the end was because you got annoyed and angry and tired, and I said, well, I'll hold it, and you said, fine, you do it.
Well, it's worth mentioning. I mean, I operated probably
most of it.
Yeah, probably 2/3 of the movie. Then we had Sandra.
And Jason.
Operating means basically hold the camera and you shoot.
Harris tells you what to do and you do it.
But I never forget hearing Ridley Scott operating like on Alien and things like that. It was just sounded so much fun. And plus, it's just fun when Gotti and I would make movies ourselves, and we were in 7th and 8th grade. We would obviously hold the camera and shoot, and I just sort of missed that. And as you start making movies, there's other people to do that. So it was great. I just had so much fun for whenever I got a chance to hold the camera and operate.
So now our Johnny scene, and this scene saw a lot of work going back and forth. I think always it was like this at the beginning, using the close-up. I always liked doing that, staying close to the guys. But there was a lot of debate about what shot to use to reveal her. We ended up going with the overhead shot. Yes, and they're always our big reaction.
Just what it looks like, Dwyer.
The king over there sitting on his throne.
It just raises so many questions. That's why I like that.
Yeah.
shot.
I think there's a piñata in the background somewhere. And the flowers on his upholstery.
But you know what? I mean, it's fucking awesome for JT. He should be walking around there in his fucking red underwear, man.
Dude, I do it all the time, man. It's real.
Right, exactly.
It's real. It's honest.
That's
honest.
power right there. That he can walk around and these two guys come in his domain and he's like, fuck you, I'm in my panties.
Yeah, whatever.
Did you get asked about the merkin?
I think just by the fact that there's a merkin in our movie, and it's
Yeah.
like, and
I mean,
she's
I know.
naked and you're looking at her crotch, we get asked about it.
Yeah,
And
we definitely get asked about it.
And I think people either think it's a big hoot or what, but you know, I have to explain it was a definite choice. And I would like to say that it's real, and it was the only thing that Jenny demanded for her character, and she spent a few months growing it out. There's two things. One, we didn't want to make a pornographic movie.
There's a practical.
And we didn't want it to be distracting. I mean, if you just saw her bare coochie, I think that's all you would be looking at.
Yeah.
I guess people are still looking at the merkin, but we also thought if she was there for an indeterminate number of years, perhaps, I mean, who knows how long, that it would be unruly and weird.
She would not be getting waxed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
I
makes
think it
no
made
sense. Yeah.
However, I remember we had,
But
you know,
a lot of people,
even Jim had a hard time sort of wrapping his head around it. We were like, no, you know, more sort of
we wanted to be grungier. We said, like, get some food particles in there. Just like we wanted to feel like a bum's beard is what. No, but we kept doing revisions, and Jim.
And I don't think we ever quite got it right. So even when people say like, oh, like, I mean, it really just looks just like a big thing of hair, when really it should have been sort of like stuck together and like
roadkill. I think like an animal that was, you know, beat to death and shoved between her legs. That's a biggie.
So you're telling me that's going on the
people ask. This is what we get asked at festivals every single time.
Yeah.
This is another one of those difficult cues in the film where you are doing tension for 10 minutes. Different beats that you've got to hit, doing them atmospherically, keeping it interesting, keeping it tonally the same as the rest of the film. All those things are tricky.
This was one that I think I had you tearing your hair out.
Yeah, because we've got all these beats of him looking at him, and do you hit that? Do you not hit it? How hard do you hit it? I mean, these are the kind of questions that when you're watching the movie, you have no idea.
Like anyone thought of anyone even thought about this, hopefully.
Most people probably think there's a guy in a keyboard just watching the movie like, oh, that sounds good. That's good.
Yeah, and this was a good thing that the guys hit on. They actually re-scripted this scene. Originally, it was JT egging on the bullies, you know, Dwyer and Johnny. And when they flipped it around to be Ricky, suddenly the scene seemed to work a lot better.
And we realized that it's much more effective if Ricky steps up and pushes Johnny.
Yeah, I remember shooting the scene, and you guys came up with a really good idea here, where they walk up to her and the camera changes position, and we're kind of at her point of view, and it just becomes really sort of ominous, and it's just really haunting. And the scene really starts to escalate.
Every time you say that we came up with a good idea, it's definitely going to go in the DVD commentary.
So, anyways, I remember suggesting this.
This is also this is a really important scene in the movie because by using her to get Johnny, sort of the relationship that Ricky has built with the dead girl is broken. You know, he's spent a lot of this movie sort of building this bond with her, and because of Joanne and Johnny, Ricky sort of throws that away to get back at this guy. In a weird way, she almost becomes connected to JT.
You're the man.
You're the man.
You're the man, Johnny. Yeah.
I'm gonna get that on a T-shirt. You're the man, Johnny, with a big picture of Nolan Gerard Funk.
Yeah, we went back and forth on which shots of her to use. I had a bunch of different shots, and this shot as he sidles up here, where she looks pretty creepy, I was worried that was too inconsistent. But you definitely convinced me that it made total sense, because it was you know, his viewpoint of what she looked like to him, and then when we see Ricky looking at her and she looks more normal, then that's kind of how Ricky sees her. Especially like this shot, because this was a shot we added later. It just isolates Johnny against that black as he has to lean in there.
Yeah, this is a scene that we obviously argued a lot about how far to go. We built 2 fake prosthetic penises, and we just basically shot it all and decided we would, in post, edit it how we wanted.
Do you know who provided the mold for the fake penis?
I cannot remember. A friend of Jim Ojala, the makeup guy, and he just said, I need a dick, and the guy was like, all right, I'll mold my own dick, and so he molded his dick for him, but I can't remember who it was.
The outtakes in this scene, there's quite a lot of very graphic stuff, and Jenny was very game, and she gives a great performance and ended up using almost none of it. We had a more intense version, especially for her, like with showing her with more power. I'm a little sad to lose some of that. We sell a lot with music, obviously.
I think it's more effective this way.
There are full prosthetic penises with blood like pumping through it and erupting. It was a big effect that we don't show.
Wait, so question. Does she bite Johnny's penis off?
See, exactly. And that is one of the things that I've always kind of like had a problem with here is that, you know, in the script, she just kind of just chomps on a little bit and draws a little blood. And I mean, it hurts him, but he's not like, you know, fuck, oh my God, my cock fell off.
It's just scary.
You know what I mean? Yeah, he's like, oh my God, and he's, you know, by the way it's done, they think that somehow she bit his cock off or, you know, it was really grievous.
Score-wise, we always struggled with how to get into this sequence here where JT's going to give his long speech. And we kind of came up with that sound. I think it's from a prepared piano kind of sound and using that, playing that 3-note theme repeated.
I think it's kind of slow down.
Exactly. So it's like reality sinking in.
And Ricky and Wheeler to jail.
Getting us down to just this moment with that's very focused with JT and Ricky.
By the time you get out.
Ricky, who probably grew up thinking he really needed JT, and really it's the other way around where, you know, in the end, JT probably needs Ricky even more. And there's a point in a friendship where friends start realizing their true dynamics versus just the dynamics they're used to and that they've always had. And you know, this is something that best friends go through.
Right here is really about these kids that I would hang around with when I was in high school in the Midwest. And I mean, their dads had shitty blue-collar dead-end jobs, and they didn't really think anything was going to happen, man. And so that gave them a freedom to just be fucking, they didn't give a shit.
A lot of people wouldn't probably realize this music's still going here, but you know, that subtle raise of the drone that's shifting up just to give an additional sense of unsettled without calling much attention to itself at all. And then coming up with how to score that big moment on her face using that same sound again.
Look at that. Yeah, whenever the audience sees that one, they're like, oh, god damn, you know.
Yeah, she was a trooper, though.
It's actually a great line. This is the best we're ever going to have. Wheeler later says something like that at the gas station.
Yeah.
That's such a big part of this movie is not wanting to end up with nothing.
Go! You know what?
Disinvited from my basement.
I think
that's you. Disinvited was definitely.
I'm sorry to say, man. I think I wrote that line.
We originally had a Iron and Wine song here.
What was Iron and Wine song?
Iron and Wine said no.
Iron and Wine said no. I'm not sure if he said no or saw the movie, but I think management saw the movie and just said no way.
Fortunately, we found a pretty good replacement here, but that's always a challenge when you're working on a low-budget film. You certainly don't have your pick of songs, so to find something that you can afford that also works really well for the scene is...
Especially a movie like this, because we're dealing in kind of strange gray areas that you don't want obvious acoustic guitar or singer-songwriter music. You want something that's a little unique, and in this case, I feel like has almost like has a sense of humor. Without being funny music, but keeps it a little bit light.
We're not knocking this song, but I think it was just a song. You know, when you're working on a movie and you work on it for a year and you're editing it, you sort of fall in love with certain aspects of it. And that was one piece we all agreed we fell in love with and meant a lot. And I don't know, maybe if this really was just the manager who said no and he sees the movie someday, he will
kill himself.
But this is another scene that was sort of added later on, which I think is really a nice touch because it's such a bittersweet moment, you know. I think,
and this is shot outside the hospital.
Yeah, like in the pseudo parking lot.
Like in a parking lot.
We did add a bunch of tracks because the song is it's fairly repetitive, and we kind of remixed the song and reconstructed it just so it would fit better. People don't realize you don't just drop a song in; you put like 30 edits in the song and flip it around and keep messing with it until you can actually get it to fit your cut. This line about lying around the ankles just kind of was serendipity that well, I did work it in so it would work there, but just that the song had that line in it.
We wanted a moment with JT alone. There's, you know, if you notice, there's not what Harris. What do you want to say?
Plus, it cuts back and forth.
Another view of the house.
Another extra view of the house. We got it. Harris is pointing at
this
the screen.
This is they move often. No, this is actually. I really like the scene. I really like the way the scene looks.
I mean, honestly, at first we were told we have to add another scene of Clint if we want a decent actor, but it worked out. It's a good scene.
Shit happens on a low-budget movie, man.
Sometimes you don't want to wear the plum shirt.
Yeah, sometimes you don't want to wear a plum shirt.
Dude, I had a plum shirt they tried to make me wear.
Yeah, I
It just
remember
got ripped.
I got a phone call about that one.
You got a
It was
phone
like,
call that I
yeah,
didn't want to
yeah,
put
I
on
got
the
a
plum
phone
shirt?
call that, no, I would not put on the plum shirt. Not only did he not like it, he tore it up. My wife, the costume designer, was a little chagrined at the fact that you ripped up her shirt.
The cartoon that he's watching, just another happy accident. I think the guys just found that, and the fact that it had a little bit of Casper and resurrection, like saving someone, just seemed to play perfect to the themes that Ricky is thinking about. We had some actually kind of fun stuff where JT's like playing cards with her down there.
I didn't know that.
And stuff. Yeah, I would have liked to work a little bit more of that in. His life down there, trying to have a real relationship with the girl.
When I read this scene, I always liked it because I remember walking up and down stairs in high school and passing people, and kind of if there was some gossip going on and, you know, someone hated you or someone liked you, you'd have to pass them on the hall, you know, going up the stairs. There's kind of no choice. There's nowhere to go. It's good.
Is that the same abandoned hospital? It really saved us shooting there.
This had some major sound problems. I remember there was an ice cream truck outside, which I think you can still hear.
There's a ice cream truck that drives around the neighborhood that I believe does sell drugs to locals.
Jason, this would have happened in the first place.
There's no way to be talking about your friends, man.
You can hear it right there.
We couldn't cut it completely out.
whole building that we found her, man.
Wanted to ADR the film as little as possible. I think never can get the same performance, and I think we mostly succeeded in cleaning it up so it works well without going to ADR.
We got it.
See, look at him. Look at him. Yeah,
It's real.
This is good. He's got it.
It's real.
Got it, that guy.
This is one of my favorite scenes here. I think it's really beautiful.
It's also one of those scenes in a script that's probably, you know, a sentence.
Yeah.
But just becomes this really beautiful moment in a movie.
The makeup scene was always one of my favorites. This was a crazy musical moment where in temping the movie, you know, you're just trying to put different things on it to make the scene really more interesting. And I came up with throwing this waltz on here, and it was one of those moments where, like, is this insane? And fortunately everyone said, it's a great idea. But then unfortunately you had the challenge of having to recreate a full orchestral waltz with a computer.
Yes.
Not because we could not afford that recording budget.
Love this scene.
Jeez, dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Once again, Jenny Spain, what a sport. Right here. That dog stepped right on her cooch during that scene right there.
Ouch.
Yep.
That was Jenny's first shot of the movie. I mean, can you imagine anything worse?
Finally, I was like, where? I got to get rid of this fucking dog. What are we going to do? Here we go. I'll just tag it into this scene.
I think the reason why the waltz works is this is a beat where we're consummating whatever relationship they do have. It's like two monsters doing this macabre dance with each other and playing a waltz theme over it seemed to make the scene really interesting.
This classroom also built in the hospital.
Yeah, this is in the hospital.
I remember this woman really wanted to have a nice long chat with me this day.
Oh, yeah?
She really wanted to know what was going on in this movie.
And you kind of bullshitted.
I passed her to you.
You're sitting there talking about perishables and rotten meat, and you're like, is that too much? I figured that this whole scene with him, like, shitting out his guts kind of needed.
Well, I remember, too, this was the first time that I'd played something that you were smelling. I remember being like, do I sniff the air?
Yeah, how do
I just flare my nostrils?
Yeah, how do you look like you smelled something horrible?
Yeah, we had our kind of over-the-top stomach sounds, but, you know, always a debate about how far you push something like that. What I do really like is the score we came up, and by focusing with the kind of bassoon and the tuba, which are of course appropriate to what Johnny's going through here, I think you did a really good job about making it both funny and very uncomfortable at the same time. And then our little flash there at the end, we went back and forth about how much to show there, but I think always liked using the quick jump cuts.
It makes you wonder what you really saw.
Yeah, because the actual scene of Johnny falling down and dragging himself out of there is a little slow.
Andrew De Palma here. This was his first day of shooting.
he had camera phone photos of his guts in the toilet.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was so proud to go around. He was going around everyone showing the camera
Well,
phone
this was his
photos.
first day.
Oh,
no, yeah.
Here comes one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
This gets a huge reaction from the audience. This is the kind of scene where in the Q&A afterwards people say, was it okay that we laughed?
And it's a strange balance, and some people the humor is a great release, and for other people it's sort of really disturbing. It's disturbing to hear other people laugh during what's clearly a pretty heavy scene. The humor is appropriate, but I think it was important to us not to have the humor belittle any of the drama or what's actually going on, or I don't think we make light of any of the serious stuff. It's just sort of momentary. I think it's nice to let people off the hook a little bit and then let them sort of check themselves and then bring them right back into it.
Who's
That's like somebody that Marcel, the director, knew, and she's a model. He took the picture.
I'm not going to reveal it, but who is that? That is somebody's picture. She's been in a lot of movies.
There was a specific thing in the script about, it says a lot about, their sick objectification, their attitude about women. Now, here's the deal with this one, is it's like if somebody's shining a fucking flashlight in your eyes, the shadow should go over your eye. Why is he holding his hand up? But he knew that it would cover up his face with the shadow, so he didn't do it.
Uh-oh. Look at the tears in the eye.
Spectacular. That's the only word I can think
Look at how red his eyes are. That's real. He's sad. Johnny's sick.
Wasn't this the 50-take wonder?
Yeah.
Oh, let's not go there.
No, I'm just. They got
Look
it
at that, because that's emotion right there. Look at that.
Yeah.
It's Johnny, man. Johnny's hurt. Johnny's his soulmate.
I think Noah was giving him a really hard time during the scene to get him so upset. This scene was hugely compromised in every possible way when we were shooting it. Looking at it, it really works. It really came together, and you did so much with so little.
Are you talking to myself?
I'm actually talking to you, Harris.
Oh.
You're talking to Harris?
Always on a low-budget film is action beats are hard because you just don't have the coverage and the time to really nail it. Do a lot of cheating with quick cuts, but I think with the sound and everything, he seems to be thoroughly in pain.
Fucking nuts, man.
Noah Segan's like, dude, this is a real knife, man. And we're like, just stab it down into the bed right here, like that. And we were trying to find things for you to stab into, man. And you were like, I'm going to fucking stab into my leg.
I was worried about
really
that because that was like a really sharp, thick knife.
Slipped and he almost stabbed himself, and he was like, I can't do this.
I believe he shot us the peace sign with both his hands and said, peace, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So I believe actually what happened.
Yeah.
But he came back.
He did come back. He always came back. He left a lot.
Yeah.
But he always came back. I tell you, it's tough making a movie. People
Yeah.
get upset, and it's tough on the actors. And you're down here screwing around with a naked girl and doing awful shit. I want to get the hell out of there too.
The Citizen Kane moment.
Yeah. That's a good point.
There was another junkyard scene strewn about somewhere right before this, right? And it was the scene where Ricky is finally like, that's fucking it, man. Things have gone too far. Now Johnny's gone to the hospital. Shit's fucked. And I'm going to put a stop to this. And we cut that scene out for purposes of running time or whatever. But you guys got into some fisticuffs, and Tim Muscatel was in that scene.
Coming up here was just a transition that I'd originally created because the next scene coming out of this kind of driving montage was Wheeler and JT in the car driving where they were going to dump Dwyer's body. And it's actually a funny scene, and the guys were concerned it was long, so I cut it down to be about 90 seconds. But in the end, they just decided it was taking too long. We had too many scenes away from Ricky. Quite liked this music kind of bridging the worlds a little bit, and we've got Celeste sounds blended in with our more drone.
Yeah, so sort of combining the two worlds and putting a dark spin on the sounds maybe we heard before.
Yeah.
This was the one scene or day that I wasn't
working at all.
Yeah, working at all.
Yeah.
And
but this was the only night that we did a full night shoot. I was the AD. We were in Los Feliz at a gas station, and obviously.
Wait, is that on Riverside?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
There was those mechanics working in the garage there, and they wouldn't leave, and we had to pay them off.
Like everything else.
Yeah, we had to pay them off, and this is 4 a.m. And every time I drive by this gas station now, places always closed. They were only open for us to be paid off. to close.
Now, I love this scene. These guys have been so used to being in this room with this woman that's tied up, that's totally objectified, that they've totally lost their sense of perspective. And so now they just think they can walk around anywhere and girls, they could just shop for them. And so they get their hands too full, and this girl kicks the shit out of them. And then this is like a real girl in the real world outside of their little fantasy place.
Yeah, these guys are just punk fucking high school screw-ups. And that's that in reality.
And because they think they have power, they don't really. And that was the point of this scene.
I think this whole section of the movie has a fair amount of humor in it. And just in cutting the film, I know that's something we all argued about and went back and forth quite a bit about how much humor should the movie have. JT's Noah's performance had a lot of these kind of, probably improv lines that sometimes just seemed really great in character, but pretty funny in a dark way. And the question was always how much of that to use. And Gotti and Marcel were they were a little bit hesitant to put too much in. So we ended up cutting out more than I was initially thinking. But, it's all about tone. You don't want the movie to become too much of a comedy for them. They wanted to keep the drama, keep the intensity going, and we're concerned that the humor would lose some of that. But we have some of it in here, and I love Wheeler's performance here and JT's little remarks, and tried to keep those in. We had our last-minute ad for our crowbar. I think it was like the day we were rushing off to Toronto. You're just trying to fill as many holes as possible, and adding that crowbar sound seemed to make this work a little bit better.
We got a lot of comments about the crowbar. People either thought it was too much and she would have just gone out, and some people didn't have a problem with it, but we definitely got a lot of notes about people saying, well, how did she...
Yeah, a lot of people were like, she would have just died.
She's a tough lady.
She is. If you meet her in person,
she's very nice.
She is very nice. This is where you really know this movie is about female empowerment. The women are going to get their vengeance here. And we get cheers in screenings. See the guys get their comeuppance a little bit there.
In the fight scene, we only were able to get this one long take, and we didn't get any coverage of that fight, and so that's why we had to use this, because that's all we could.
But it was great. I love how.
Yeah, and it ends up it's a happy accident. Here in the original script, bam, she gets killed, but we changed it.
They hit her over the head with the crowbar, and she dies, and that's the scene. Trent. He wrote such a great first draft that it was pretty easy to see what didn't work and what needed fixing. He always said he wrote a draft and that was it. So what we did to it may have just been like the logical second draft stuff.
All this stuff, man.
The song is great.
The sun was coming up. We had maybe 40 minutes to shoot all this stuff. And I remember just running and going, okay, next setup, come on. We were fighting and fighting to finish this thing.
You guys did a great job, because I remember I had no idea how this went or how it was filmed, and when I first saw it, I think in Toronto, it was such a great surprise. You guys kicked ass.
Yeah, that scene, that whole sequence right there really gets a lot of... it brings a different tone to the movie for a little bit before we start to go into this really dark...
No, it gets serious, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just... Yeah, you guys killed that scene. So good.
Yeah, our window sound.
Favorite sound in the movie.
Yeah, that's production sound.
I like that you cut right when Wheeler moves his eyes.
Yeah. Well.
That's nice. It's right up. Oh.
American Beauty reference right there with the bag blowing in the wind.
And here I remember walking down the hall and making sure that the machete glimmers.
Yes.
Don't turn it to its side. Don't hold it normally. Just hold it to your side so we can see what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, it works, all right? You know what it is.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
movie magic right there.
This was always a very long shot of Ricky walking down the hallway. And I think, once we got the score, it started working.
It was like he's slowly tiptoeing towards something.
Something that's...
not quite right.
Yeah. I played with that overlay of the Christmas lights and stuff like that. Just tried multiple images there to try to get a little more sense of mystery and suspense and almost weird, romantic, magical feel.
We originally wanted this next scene to be full of candles.
We spent a lot of money on a fire marshal.
So we decided to go with Christmas lights, and we got, I think, as many as we could afford that day.
It was like a Friday, and we sent people out to get as many white Christmas lights as you can get, and of course, this was not Christmas time, and it was tough.
It was a little tricky.
Actually, this is a good point to mention. We did a lot of steadying of shots because the most of the movie was shot handheld. But sometimes you just want an image to just be still, and that one especially on the girl's close-up. You can add filters, which can smooth out the footage. I use that quite a bit at various points, and especially on that one, just where we get quiet and we hear the crying, and you almost think it's coming from her for a moment.
You'll notice Ricky's lip is suddenly bloodier because she hits him in the face. We cut that part out. You know, we never thought of it as a zombie movie, and we get asked a lot, why don't you call it a zombie movie? And we say, when we say it's a zombie movie, then the bad guys are the zombies, and this movie is not there. She isn't that character, and really the villains, and all the antagonists, they're all just guys.
It's more interesting to go to those dark places and that we all have inside us, and not think about right or wrong, because we all have darkness, and this is really a story about exploring that darkness.
You write this kind of thing, and obviously it comes from the what would you do in this situation? You know, what am I? Am I Ricky or JT? And I'm probably a little bit of both, and it's not something you like to admit.
I love the way the piano subtly begins this cue.
It's sort of doing a call and answer. I don't know how obvious
call and
that
response,
is.
yeah. Absolutely.
Sweetheart, I think it's got just about everything.
This next piece of music coming up is my favorite piece of Joseph Bauer, as the roundabout begins.
Sort of bitter reality, bittersweet. It's really heartbreaking. I think it's that moment, you know, we all sort of go through at some point or another where you realize you can't have what you want.
The way this whole scene plays out, you know, is basically a seduction, is the way we kind of approached it. And, you know, he's almost trying to hypnotize Ricky or kind of cast a spell. And so the motif of this rotating, the way the guys shot this, spinning, which is a bitch to edit, I gotta say. I don't recommend shooting scenes this way. It definitely makes it really hard when you get in the editing room. And it took quite a while. I think my whole Christmas break was spent at my folks' house cursing at the computer trying to make the scene work, going back and forth. But especially once we get this hypnotic cue on it, which I think he did a great job on, that brings both the romance, the sadness in a way.
The decision he has to make, too.
Exactly.
I think that's kind of a key thing I try to hit.
Yeah, and especially I always like the low notes coming in here in the sense of
Don't fucking make me do
a little
this,
bit of
okay?
foreboding. But it's all beautiful at the same time, which
He's sort of seducing him.
Yeah. We had that idea with our temp, and I think we only improved on it with the score here.
I am doing this for your benefit, Rick. She's all yours.
It's really amazing the way the music works here. I mean, everything just sort of comes together.
Who the fuck is that?
Don't you worry about her.
The showdown begins.
Yes.
I mean, you got a guy with a sword.
It is good.
You got to play it up a little bit.
Yep.
But not too much.
Do I?
And the whole thing starts to curdle here.
Thinking that I know you a little bit better than you even know
It's
yourself.
funny, this movie, when you watch it, it really goes through some... I'm like, is this a horror movie? I mean, because now it's kind of like...
No, man, it's
weird.
a fable, man. It's like Lord of the Flies, you know?
What is this thing?
That's
anyway?
what I
think
read, man. I read Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
I read a fable. I never got this. He just loses it, right? Wheeler, right there. He just
Wheeler?
loses
Yeah,
it, just
yeah.
because he's like, because everybody's saying like, no, this is not a good idea.
Yeah, let's just say it's a, we gotta break out of the scene, get things moving along here.
Yeah.
Well, start
also,
to signal the coming apocalypse.
Is it just that Candace is so tempting that I guess he's also kind of drinking the Kool-Aid? He's also he's listening to what I'm saying. You're not listening to what I'm saying. Maybe Wheeler's listening to what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, he is the ubiquitous third wheel type of a guy who could go in either direction.
Impressionable,
He doesn't really
yeah.
have thing for himself. It's whoever is the strongest around him he'll lean towards.
I like your cut to wide right there. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, it was the only way I could have Wheeler fall down. We had no other
feels right,
coverage.
though.
Yeah, it
Now
does.
we've reassessed what just happened.
Yeah, the power and everything's shifted here. So you want to be out for that wide.
Time to man up, Rick. Who you trying to be? Anyway, man. Since day one.
So this is where we bring back our kind of the breakup theme. I think originally we were both worried it was going to be too much, and we kind of kept tweaking it and messing about with exactly where it hit.
Ricky
It's kind of sad.
It reminds me of an old man playing at a piano 2 o'clock at night in a restaurant. No one's there, you know.
Yeah, JT's gonna be all alone here.
But then it gets a little bigger here as we
Joanne
introduce
Skinner,
Joanne.
man, you think she's
Right.
gonna choose you?
What's really at
in
stake?
the real world?
Yeah, because the stakes are getting pretty high here.
In the real world.
I'm even working with Joe, which is great, which is what I always wanted. Like we had a lot of back and forth on this, which was sort of really fun for us. And he was open to it. Maybe not happy all the time, but because I love music, and it was really great. If I was skilled or talented in music, I would love to do music. So it's great when you have someone who knows what they're doing, but lets you feel like you're part of it a little bit.
We were talking earlier about finding timbres that are kind of original and interesting, and this is where we use that kind of violin timbre coming in here. That is a sound that I made at one point from a violin being scraped, really close mic'd. So there's pitch, but there's mostly kind of scrape. And then you just layer that over and over and over and build up a kind of interesting drone here that starts to bend up and just seems to have the right combination of everything going wrong.
That was a hard day. I mean, I think we were shooting the scene for a day and a half.
No, I think the scene was a day, wasn't it?
No, it was a day.
It was a little more than a day.
This was like 13 pages or something ridiculous that we had to, with full makeup and the prosthetic hand. And I mean, it's just, we didn't know how we were going to do it. Somehow you just do it.
Yeah, no, this one along with the Johnny scene was the monster scenes.
With the jocks, yeah.
Yeah, they were really huge scenes. I think we spent a day and a half on each.
There was a question of how to get out of that musically. Do you keep it going?
Yeah, we tried that. We kept the music kind of going really intense all the way through this, and it works. It definitely, they're screaming and yelling, and it all plays.
But there's no beat to get out of it.
Exactly. That was the problem. We had no way to get from the intensity of all that music and get down to this moment right here where they just get quiet on the stairs. Just decided to come out with a hit when they run to the stairs and then just play this all with a pulse, which, when it's cranked up in a big theater, it's pretty intense. There's a lot of sub going there, and
I really love the shot. I mean, you really sort of feel his frustration, his sort of
What I love about this too is just it's not the typical scene that would be in
at this point in a normal horror movie.
In a normal horror movie
where your hero is crying.
Yeah,
I love this, Shiloh. This is like This is
absolutely.
like the culmination of the whole character, man.
It is.
Just please fucking listen to me. I mean, this is so raw.
so here you can really hear some of the more creature effects in this whole sequence of the dead girl. I'm just trying to meld those in with some of Jenny, the actress's kind of yells. Now we go to full-on big.
Beast is loose.
This is the kind of music Joe loves to write.
That's the sort of shot where we had no time to really put her in makeup, so we kind of have her faces in makeup, but her body wasn't, and we had to, in post, sort of color her shoulders to match her face. We were constantly getting called from the makeup department wondering what part of her we were going to see, because they only had time to make up that part, whether it was her back or her arms.
How long did it take to make up Jenny? 6 hours?
I think for a full body it was 6, but there were times that he's like, I have 2 hours, what do you want me to do?
That was a stunt person, obviously, but Noah gave us a hard time. He wanted to throw himself into the fence.
The stunt guy said, no, I can really take it. And he took it, man, because he broke the wooden support on the fence. This little guy, my size, man.
They're just finding the right kind of rising tone
That's
here.
the bass drum rub. I just remembered where that's
the
from.
ones that we did.
Took a rubber ball, licked it, and rubbed it around the edge of a big drum.
It was like a frame drum.
Frame drum, yeah.
Yep. I remember we did a lot of takes.
Put the
on
mic
that.
underneath it, and it very tonal.
And then we used that in the sampler and kind of bent it.
Yeah, put a lot of reverb, so you really echo out the tone. It's a pretty neat sound.
Yeah. So yeah, the dead girl getting away there. We thought about putting the song from Born Free there, or when she was like running up the hill. No, I think I had that. I think that it's coming up, but that would have been she's liberated, free as the wind, whatever the lyric is. Yeah, and then how to score this scene, and this is where we use that string timbre again. That. It gives a real uneasy feeling, but it's tonal at the same time.
Now, when we were meeting with Jim to hire a makeup effects person, one thing he showed us in his samples was this sort of split lip effect that he did for a short I think he was working on or something. And
exactly
we thought it was really cool, and we were like, oh,
where can we use that?
Yeah, where can we use that? And you're hired. Because it's just such a simple thing that's actually really so more effective than like if he was more messed up. And
also in the original script, Noah, she bit your dick off. You know what I mean? Which I thought would have been a better comeuppance, obviously.
I just remember, wondering, okay, how do you react to having, like, your whole face split open? And I just remember thinking, like, it's worse off not knowing how bad your wound is than being able to do something about it. Yeah, so, there's this moment where earlier where JT, I felt like JT was just sort of going, like, oh shit, I've got no idea what's wrong with me.
But I know
this is really bad.
I remember this cut was much longer.
I had a much longer version that was a little more character driven, and then they kind of showed me something that was really, really short. And I think we ended up with something in between. Basically, it made sense to not spend too long. I know they were particularly worried that we were ending the movie too many times. But I also thought, it's really, I think we all agreed, it's really important to keep our character moments in here.
I love you. I think this is also another scene where the music works really well. I mean, it's so... I think it's, really where the reality is setting in for him.
I always liked that this felt like it was kind of almost going back to the beginning of the movie in a weird way. Mm-hmm. So when he closes his eyes really tight, it's like he's remembering what it used to be. And
it definitely has that quality of remembering and something lost.
Yeah.
A lost love, lost life, lost...
I think playing it sweet like that just is way more interesting than just more dramatic and more and bigger. I don't know.
I agree.
It's so heartbreaking. I mean, this moment where she says, "Take me home." I mean, such a sort of helpless position.
Yeah.
To be in.
And he kind of has made his decision. And now we wait to find out what it is.
Another cut to black. We had to have another.
You gotta
one.
have that. I mean,
yeah.
It's epilogue.
Yeah. So this is where we needed Born Free coming in.
Yes. I think this was actually it was the last day of the principal shoot.
Yeah.
And
the last generator, shot last day.
Yeah, and the generator died. We had a little putt-putt, a small little generator, and we just sort of sent it way out there and had a couple of lights plugged in, and able to get the last shot.
The Deadgirl also in the original draft does not escape. She has her head cut off and dies in the basement. And that was just another thing that, she took so much abuse for the whole movie, and it seemed unfair to not let her get away.
I like how now you're wearing a sensible shirt.
Right. Ricky's changed. He's got the sensible shirt. All that's going on.
But I'm reading your comic book?
You're reading a copy of Super Pimps?
Super Pimps, yeah. That's a buddy of mine that goes to my local comic shop. Shout out. Big up to Super Pimps.
I think one thing that's interesting is people, sometimes talk about whether the ending is happy or...
Yeah, did he do something? What was his motivation? Was he saving her? Was it a selfish act? Was it...
And I think
we're not going to answer the question.
Yeah, the answer's a little different for everybody.
Yeah.
What was the answer for you, Harris?
For me, it was, even after everything she does to him, he still loves her, and he can't let her go. But then, of course, you always have people that are saying, if he really loved her, he wouldn't do this to her.
I think one of the things that attracted Colin, the programmer who invited us to Toronto, was that he wasn't expecting that angle when he originally pitched the film, that you can almost see this as more of a character piece and even a love story, which I think just surprised him. It wasn't what he was expecting based on what you hear when someone pitches it. Marcel and Gotti always struggle at film festivals when they encounter people and they're like, ooh, I'm not sure I want to see that, and they have to say this movie is something a little bit different than what you expect. Everything in our aesthetic choices with music, sound, was trying to push it in that direction. We all agreed that the end montage of the movie deserved a song, and for all of our festival run, we had a Radiohead song, House of Cards. And then the question is, of course, inevitably when you can't get the Radiohead song, trying to find, a band that's not well known so that you can afford it, but still has an interesting vibe. I think I spent a week just downloading 10,000 songs. I found about 5 or 6 songs and then pitched them to the guys, and this is the one they picked. This is a band called Liars. And then we spent another 2 weeks remixing the song to try to make it really fit. Because at that point, I couldn't change the cut. And of course, the song doesn't really fit the cut the way you have it. If you go out to the store, if you do like the song, it's probably not going to sound exactly like this. But I think the song itself is still intact. Just living with the film, this tiny team for all these months, walking into a room at Toronto Film Festival and with 1,200 people and watching your movie is definitely kind of a surreal experience. Partly probably because we were so sleep deprived, but that was a nice payoff at the end for all that hard work. Actually did a Dolby Digital screening where we walk in with a hard drive and just deliver the film that way, which means you don't have to strike a film print. So you can actually work right up to the last second.
We did.
For better or worse, we did. Marcel had to already fly to Toronto because they had some pre-screening press and all sorts of events, and poor Gotti had to stay behind and paced back and forth in the studio, making sure we knew that we had to finish the film. Joe was working at the score back at the house. I was over at the studio with an air mattress, sleeping a couple hours, and then mixing 24 hours at a time. And we did that for about a week. And I think I realized we were in new territory when my face started to burn. And I couldn't feel my face anymore, and my hands on the console on the faders were numb. I knew we could get it done, but I was just worried about losing consciousness. We were screening Saturday night, and on Friday we were mixing the last reel. We got it down, and then Gotti and I jumped in the car, drove over the hill to Burbank to Dolby Labs, and we had a really nice guy over there, Tim, that calmly put the sound on the drive, and Gotti hopped in the car and got on a plane and took the red eye to Toronto.
Slept the whole way.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. We did find out that we had Lionsgate had their private jet just in case he didn't make the flight, but they weren't going to fly him. They were just going to fly the drive out to Toronto, but he did make it. He was accosted at the airport by the Toronto Film Festival people that whisked him off to the venue, and they loaded the drive, and it worked perfectly. But of course, as soon as we returned from Toronto, we went right back in the studio and got to improve the mix a bunch and get things a little more where we wanted it to be. It's kind of, as they say with film, a film is never finished, it's abandoned. You just work and work and work, and then you're done, whether or not you're done or not, and you just move to the next project.
Deadgirl 2.
Yeah, Deadgirl, yeah. Deadgirl goes to the Bahamas.
That or Vegas. I mean, it's really only two choices.
All right, well, thanks for
There it is.
Thanks for listening.
Deadgirl.
Deadgirl. I mean, this was a bitch of a movie that was in pretty miserable conditions, and no one ever complained, and they were really great. They were a good group of people too, nice, and I actually liked having the breaks with lunch and going, and they're gonna say I don't remember that fucking guy sitting with me. He used to go off to the side. No, they were good.
Who did we not like, and who do we not want to work with again?
I think it's about half those grips. I just do want to mention, I play a game and see how many times you can count.
Phil Blackford.
Blackford's name in the credits.
Every time you see Phil Blackford, take a shot.
Yes. Yeah, if you're drinking, have a shot. You'll be drunk by the end of the night.
I think it's directly proportional to the amount of hours spent in post on this movie.
Save it for your comments.
Yeah.